Maya Chen never meant to stand out. The autumn breeze scattered golden leaves across the courtyard of Westridge Academy as Maya hurried through the main entrance, her dark hair partially hiding her face. It was her third week at the new school, and she had mastered the art of being invisible. Head down, books clutched to her chest, she navigated the crowded hallways with the practiced efficiency of someone who preferred walls to people. "Watch it." A tall boy with a Letterman jacket bumped into her shoulder, not bothering to look back as Maya steadied herself against a row of lockers. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and continued walking, her eyes finding the familiar pattern of the floor tiles. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. Turn at the water fountain. 6 more steps to her locker. The routine brought comfort in a place where everything else felt foreign. Westridge Academy was nothing like her old school in the city. This place was all polished floors, ivy-covered brick, and students who seemed to have known each other since kindergarten. Maya spun the combination lock with practiced fingers, right to 18, left to 7, right to 32. The small metal door swung open, revealing her neatly organized textbooks and a single photograph taped to the inside, a picture of her sitting at a grand piano, her grandmother standing proudly behind her with hands resting on her shoulders. Her fingers lingered on the photo for a moment before she swapped her history textbook for chemistry. "Did you hear about the talent show?" A voice from the next locker over floated toward her. Maya didn't look up. The question wasn't meant for her. Nobody at Westridge spoke to her unless they had to. "Vanessa says it's going to be epic this year," the voice continued. "Her dad donated new lighting for the auditorium." Maya closed her locker softly and walked away, the mention of the talent show sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Performances, stages, audiences. These were things she had worked hard to avoid for the past 3 years. In Mr. Reynolds' chemistry class, Maya slipped into her seat at the back corner, next to the window. Perfect for staring out at the oak trees when her mind wandered, which it often did during school hours. Not because she couldn't follow along. Maya maintained straight A's without much effort, but because sometimes her thoughts drifted to music, to melodies that formed in her head during quiet moments. "Partner up for today's lab," Mr. Reynolds announced, clapping his hands together. "Find someone you haven't worked with before." Maya's stomach tightened. The familiar dance of partner selection began, with friends gravitating toward each other, while she remained seated, pretending to organize her notes. It would end the same way it always did, with her being assigned to whoever was left or working alone if the numbers were uneven. "Looks like you're with me today," said a friendly voice. Maya looked up to find Zoe Park standing beside her, desk lab notebook in hand. Zoe wasn't part of the popular crowd, but she seemed well-liked, always surrounded by a small group of friends who ate lunch together in the courtyard. "I don't bite," Zoe added with a small smile when Maya didn't immediately respond. "Sorry," Maya mumbled, gathering her things. I space out sometimes." They worked surprisingly well together. Zoe was methodical and precise, reading instructions carefully before proceeding. Maya appreciated that she didn't feel the need to fill every silence with chatter, though she did ask occasional questions about the experiment. "You're really good at this," Zoe commented as Maya carefully measured out the correct amount of solution. "Chemistry, I mean." Maya shrugged. "It's just following instructions." "Not for everyone," Zoe laughed, nodding toward a pair of boys who had somehow turned their liquid purple instead of the expected blue. "Where did you go to school before Westridge?" "Lincoln Arts Academy in the city," Maya replied, adjusting the Bunsen burner. "Arts Academy?" Zoe's eyebrows rose with interest. "What was your focus?" Maya hesitated, her hand stilling over the beaker. "Piano," she finally said, the word feeling strange on her tongue after so long avoiding the subject. "That's cool," Zoe said, her tone genuine. "Do you still play?" "Not really." Maya turned her attention back to the experiment, hoping Zoe would drop the subject. To her relief, Mr. Reynolds chose that moment to check on their progress, and the conversation shifted back to chemistry. When the final bell rang at 3:15, Maya packed her bag quickly and headed toward the exit. Most days she walked the 1.5 miles home, using the time to clear her head. But today her grandmother had texted that she would pick her up, a rare occurrence that usually meant something special was happening. Sure enough, her grandmother's faded blue sedan was idling in the pickup lane, the passenger window rolling down as Maya approached. "There's my little songbird," Grandmother Chen called out, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Maya slid into the passenger seat, the familiar scent of her grandmother's jasmine perfume wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "How was school?" her grandmother asked, pulling away from the curb. "Fine," Maya replied automatically. Then, remembering her lab partner, she added, "I worked with someone new in chemistry today." "A friend?" her grandmother asked, hope evident in her voice. "Just a lab partner," Maya corrected, watching the school recede in the side mirror. Her grandmother's sigh was barely audible. "I made red bean soup for after dinner, and I tuned the piano this morning." The piano, the beautiful upright that had followed them from apartment to apartment over the years, despite the hassle of moving such a heavy instrument, the one her grandmother had saved for years to buy when Maya showed early promise as a child. The same piano that now sat untouched in their living room, collecting dust except for when her grandmother played simple tunes in the evenings. "Thanks, Nai," Maya said, using the Chinese term of endearment that had stuck even as her other language skills faded. "But I have a lot of homework tonight." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the unspoken hanging between them. Finally, her grandmother spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "The piano misses you, Maya, and so does the music." Maya stared out the window, watching suburban houses blur together. "The music doesn't miss anyone." "That's not true," her grandmother replied. "Music lives in the playing of it, in the listening. Without that, it's just sleeping." Maya thought about the melodies that still came to her sometimes, the ones she would quietly hum and then try to forget, the compositions she sometimes worked out in her head during boring classes, her fingers twitching slightly as if pressing invisible keys. When they arrived home, a modest 2-bedroom house they had moved into after leaving the city, Maya went straight to her room, claiming homework as an excuse. But instead of opening her backpack, she sat on her bed and pulled out the small notebook she kept hidden between her mattress and box spring. The pages were filled with musical notations, fragments of compositions she'd been unable to stop herself from recording. Some dated back 3 years, to the time right after the disaster at the Young Artists Competition. Others were more recent, evolved versions of earlier ideas. Maya ran her fingers over the notes, hearing them in her mind. This was as close as she allowed herself to get to actual playing these days. The thought of sitting at a piano, of being vulnerable in that way again, made her hands shake and her chest tighten. She remembered all too clearly the silence that had fallen over the concert hall when she froze on stage. The sympathetic murmurs that gradually rose as seconds ticked by and she remained motionless at the keys, panic overwhelming her. The burning shame as she finally stood and fled the stage, leaving behind her dreams of music school and competition titles. Maya closed the notebook and slid it back into its hiding place. She had remade herself at Westridge, quiet, unremarkable, safe from expectations. No one there knew about her past or the fact that by age 14, she had been considered one of the most promising young pianists in the state, and that's exactly how she wanted to keep it. Later that evening, after a dinner of her grandmother's dumplings and the promised red bean soup, Maya sat at her desk working through calculus problems. Through the wall, she could hear the soft, familiar notes of her grandmother playing the piano, a simple folk melody they both knew by heart. Almost unconsciously, Maya's right hand began to move, her fingers pressing against the desk as if it were a keyboard. For just a moment, she allowed herself to remember how it felt, the cool ivory beneath her fingertips, the perfect resistance of the keys, the way the notes would bloom in the air around her. Then she curled her hand into a fist and returned to her math homework. Tomorrow would be another day of blending in at Westridge Academy. Another day of being invisible. Another day of safety. Little did Maya know that her carefully constructed anonymity was about to be shattered, and that the very thing she feared most would soon be thrust upon her in the cruelest way possible. The annual Westridge Academy talent show was a big deal, not just a casual gathering in the gym with folding chairs and a portable sound system, but a proper production in the school's well-funded auditorium with professional lighting, sound equipment, and programs printed on glossy paper. It was the kind of event parents marked on calendars months in advance and students spent weeks preparing for. Maya knew all this, despite never having attended one. She had heard enough hallway chatter over the past month to piece together its significance in the school's social ecosystem. "Did you sign up yet?" A girl with a high ponytail asked her friend as Maya walked past them in the hallway. "Yesterday. I'm doing a dance routine to that new song by The Weeknd," the friend replied, mimicking a few dance moves that made her backpack swing dangerously close to Maya's face. Maya sidestepped them and continued toward her locker, her gaze catching on a bright blue poster taped to the wall. "Westridge Academy presents Spotlight, Annual Talent Showcase. Sign-ups now open." Below the bold lettering was a QR code and instructions for submitting acts online or on the physical form in the main office. Maya's eyes lingered on it for a moment before she looked away. Not for her. Never again. "Earth to Maya," a voice broke through her thoughts. Zoe from chemistry class was standing beside her, waving a hand in front of her face. "Sorry," Maya mumbled, fumbling with her locker combination. "Just thinking." "About the talent show?" Zoe asked, nodding toward the poster. "Are you going to sign up? You mentioned you played piano, right?" Maya's fingers slipped on the lock. "That was a long time ago." "I'm doing a spoken word piece," Zoe continued, either missing or politely, ignoring Maya's discomfort. "It's terrifying, but my therapist says facing fears is good for personal growth." She rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Anyway, a bunch of us are meeting in the courtyard at lunch to talk about our acts. You should join." Before Maya could decline, the warning bell rang, and Zoe hurried off with a casual, "Think about it," tossed over her shoulder. Maya had no intention of thinking about it, or about the talent show at all. But as she sat through her morning classes, her mind kept drifting back to pianos and performances, and the way her heart used to race with excitement, rather than dread. At lunch, she took her usual spot in the corner of the library, a ham sandwich and apple from home spread out on a napkin as she worked through her English assignment. The library was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the chaotic cafeteria or the courtyard where Zoe and her friends would be discussing their talent show plans. "Hey, library girl!" Maya looked up, startled to see Vanessa Miller standing at her table. Vanessa was Westridge royalty, student council president, homecoming queen, and unofficial social director of the senior class. Her long blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her designer clothes a sharp contrast to Maya's thrift store jeans and faded sweater. Hi?" Maya responded, confused by the unexpected attention. Vanessa slid into the chair, across from her, uninvited. "You're new, right? Maya something?" "Chen," Maya supplied, wondering what could possibly have brought Vanessa to the library, let alone to her table. "Right." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Maya Chen, word is you're some kind of piano prodigy." Maya's blood went cold. "What? No, who told you that?" Vanessa shrugged elegantly. "People talk. Someone said you went to that fancy art school downtown. They don't let just anyone in there, do they?" "I'm not," Maya started, then shook her head. "I don't play anymore." "That's too bad," Vanessa said, leaning forward slightly. "The talent show could use some class. It's mostly bad dance routines and worse singing." She laughed, the sound crystal clear in the quiet library. "Anyway, just thought I'd say hi. Welcome to Westridge and all that." As suddenly as she had appeared, Vanessa was gone, leaving Maya with a knot in her stomach and a half-eaten sandwich she no longer wanted. How had Vanessa found out about Lincoln Arts? And who had told her about the piano? Maya packed up her lunch, her hands slightly shaky. She had been so careful to keep that part of her life buried. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. Maya kept her head down even more than usual, avoiding eye contact and taking the long way to classes to minimize her chances of running into Vanessa or her friends again. When the final bell rang, she practically ran to her locker, wanting nothing more than to get home and hide in the safety of her bedroom. But as she approached, she saw a small crowd gathered nearby, whispering and giggling. They dispersed as she got closer, a few of them shooting glances her way that made her skin prickle with unease. Had she somehow become the subject of school gossip? Zoe appeared at her side as she was loading books into her backpack. "Hey, did you hear what happened?" "No," Maya replied cautiously. "Someone signed you up for the talent show," Zoe said, her expression concerned. "Your name's on the list for a piano performance. I thought maybe you did it after we talked this morning, but you seemed surprised." Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "What? No, I didn't. I wouldn't." "The sign-up sheet was in the main office," Zoe continued. "Anyone could have done it. Maybe someone heard you play and thought you should share your talent." But Maya knew better. The tight knot of dread in her stomach told her exactly what had happened. This wasn't about showcasing talent. This was about public humiliation. "I need to fix this," she said, slamming her locker shut with more force than intended. "I need to get my name off that list." Zoe followed as Maya marched toward the main office, her usual desire to remain invisible temporarily overridden by panic. Mrs. Patel, the school secretary, looked up as Maya burst through the door. "Can I help you?" "The talent show sign-up," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Someone put my name on it as a joke. I need to remove it." Mrs. Patel frowned and pulled out a clipboard. "Let me see. Chen Maya, piano performance." She looked up. "This isn't your signature?" Maya shook her head. "Well, that's concerning," Mrs. Patel said, reaching for a pen. Is there a problem?" Mr. Daniels, the assistant principal and faculty advisor for student activities, emerged from his office, coffee mug in hand. Mrs. Patel explained the situation while Maya stood there, heart pounding in her ears. Mr. Daniels studied the sign-up sheet, his brow furrowed. "I'm sorry this happened, Maya. Unfortunately, programs have already gone to print with the final lineup. We're 2 weeks out from the show." "But I'm not performing," Maya insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I can't." "Perhaps we can find a solution," Mr. Daniels said, his tone sympathetic but firm. "The talent show is an important school tradition. Cancellations this late would disrupt the entire program timing." "What if I just don't show up?" Maya asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Mr. Daniels sighed. "Then we'd have an awkward gap in the program and a lot of confused audience members. Plus, it would set a poor precedent for commitment. Why don't you come by my office tomorrow and we can discuss alternatives? Maybe a different type of performance you'd be more comfortable with?" Maya wanted to scream that there was no type of performance she'd be comfortable with, that the very thought made her feel like she was drowning. Instead, she nodded stiffly and left the office, Zoe trailing behind her. "That's completely unfair," Zoe said once they were in the hallway. "They can't force you to perform." "They just did," Maya replied, her voice hollow. "Do you know who might have done this?" Zoe asked, her expression concerned. Maya thought of Vanessa's strange visit to the library, the timing too perfect to be coincidence. "I have an idea." As if summoned by the thought, Maya spotted Vanessa and her friends huddled by the water fountain, stealing glances in her direction and laughing behind their hands. The confirmation sent a wave of cold anger through her. "I need to go," Maya said to Zoe, heading for the exit. "Wait," Zoe called after her. "Are you okay? Do you want me to help?" But Maya was already pushing through the doors, gulping in the cool afternoon air as she started the long walk home. Her mind raced with the horror of what was happening. In 2 weeks, she was expected to sit at a piano in front of the entire school, parents, teachers, students, and perform. The very thing that had broken her 3 years ago. By the time she reached her front door, tears were streaming down her face. Her grandmother took one look at her and opened her arms without a word. Maya fell into them, sobbing out the whole story. Vanessa's visit, the forged sign-up, Mr. Daniels' refusal to let her withdraw. They want to embarrass me, she choked out. They want everyone to see me fail. Her grandmother stroked her hair, letting her cry until there were no tears left. Then she gently tilted Maya's chin up to meet her eyes. And will you? Will you fail? Maya pulled back, surprised by the question. I can't play anymore, Nai. You know that. No, her grandmother said, her voice unusually stern. You won't play. That's different from can't. You don't understand, Maya said, wiping at her face. Last time was last time, her grandmother interrupted. This is now. Those children think they know who you are, what you can do. They've set a trap for you. A small, fierce smile appeared on her lined face. Perhaps it's time to show them exactly who they're dealing with. Maya couldn't sleep that night. Her grandmother's words kept echoing in her mind. Those children think they know who you are. Perhaps it's time to show them exactly who they're dealing with. But who was she dealing with? The Maya who had once spent hours at the piano without noticing time passing? The girl who felt music in her bones, who could lose herself in Chopin and Liszt? That Maya seemed like a distant memory, a character from someone else's life story. She tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around her legs as her mind churned through increasingly desperate scenarios. She could fake an illness on the day of the show. She could claim a family emergency. She could simply not show up despite Mr. Daniels' warning about commitment. Or she could sit down at that piano and play. The thought sent a wave of nausea through her. She could still feel the weight of the silence that had fallen over the concert hall 3 years ago, the prickle of sweat on her forehead as she stared at the keys, her fingers suddenly foreign and uncooperative, the burning shame as she fled the stage. What if it happened again? When her alarm went off the next morning, Maya had barely slept. She dragged herself through her morning routine, the dark circles under her eyes a testament to her restless night. You look like you could use some tea, her grandmother said, placing a steaming mug on the table as Maya picked at her breakfast. I'm not hungry, Maya mumbled. Tea isn't food, her grandmother replied, pushing the mug closer. It's medicine for the soul. Maya wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, breathing in the familiar jasmine scent. I kept thinking about what you said last night, her grandmother nodded, waiting. I don't think I can do it, Nai. Maya's voice was small. What if I freeze again in front of the whole school this time? Then you freeze, her grandmother said simply. The world doesn't end. Easy for you to say, Maya replied, a rare edge to her voice. You won't be the one everyone's laughing at. No, her grandmother agreed. But tell me this, which is worse? Trying and possibly failing, or letting fear make your decisions for you forever? Maya had no answer for that. She drank her tea in silence, her grandmother's question following her like a shadow as she headed to school. The whispers started as soon as she entered the building. Students huddled in small groups, conversations pausing as she walked by, only to resume with increased intensity once she passed. News of her upcoming performance had clearly spread. Hey, piano girl, someone called from across the hallway. Maya kept her head down and walked faster. In chemistry class, Zoe slid into the seat beside her. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Maya lied, not meeting her eyes. Listen, Zoe said, lowering her voice as Mr. Reynolds began writing equations on the board. I did some digging. It was definitely Vanessa and her friends who signed you up. My brother's friend overheard them laughing about it in the cafeteria yesterday. Great, Maya muttered. Good to have confirmation. The thing is, Zoe continued, they're saying you used to be some kind of prodigy, but had a meltdown at a big competition. Is that true? Maya felt the blood drain from her face. How had they found out about that? She'd been so careful to keep her past buried. It doesn't matter, she said finally. Ancient history. It matters if they're using it against you, Zoe argued. You could report them for bullying. Maya shook her head. And look even more pathetic? No thanks. Mr. Reynolds called the class to attention then, and they fell silent. But Maya could hardly focus on the lesson. Vanessa and her friends hadn't just randomly picked on the new girl. They had specifically chosen a form of humiliation tailored to Maya's worst fear. They knew about her past, about her failure. Somehow, they had discovered her secret and weaponized. After school, Maya reluctantly made her way to Mr. Daniels's office as promised. He was typing on his computer when she knocked on the open door. "Ah, Maya. Come in," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I've been thinking about your situation. I really can't perform," Maya said before he could continue. "I don't play piano anymore." Mr. Daniels leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Mrs. Liu from the music department tells me you were quite accomplished. She recognized your name from competitions a few years back." Maya stiffened. That was a long time ago. "3 years isn't so long," Mr. Daniels said kindly. "And talent like yours doesn't just disappear. It does when you don't use it," Maya countered. Mr. Daniels sighed. "Look, I understand your reluctance. Stage fright is a real thing. But I also have a responsibility to the show and the other performers. Programs are printed. The schedule is set." He paused. "What if we moved you earlier in the lineup? Less time to get nervous?" Maya wanted to scream. This wasn't about nerves or where she appeared in the program. This was about a wound that had never properly healed, about a piece of herself she had locked away because the pain of losing it was too great. "Instead," she said quietly, "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Mr. Daniels replied, clearly relieved to have made some progress. "And Maya, sometimes facing our fears is the only way past them." It was the second time in 24 hours someone had given her that advice. Maya wasn't sure if that made it more or less annoying. As she left the office, the halls were mostly empty. After-school activities were in full swing, with sports teams practicing outside and club meetings happening in various classrooms. Maya had planned to go straight home, but as she passed the music room, a sound stopped her in her tracks. Piano music. Rich, complex, flowing through the partially open door. Without conscious thought, Maya found herself moving closer, drawn by the familiar cascade of notes. Through the door's window, she could see Mrs. Liu, the elderly music teacher, seated at the baby grand piano, her eyes closed as her fingers danced across the keys. She was playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of the first classical pieces Maya had mastered as a child. Maya stood there, transfixed, memories washing over her in waves. The countless hours of practice, the joy of mastering a difficult passage. The way music had been a language she understood when words failed. And suddenly, standing there in the empty hallway, Maya felt a different kind of ache. Not the sharp pain of failure, but the dull throb of loss. She missed it. Despite everything, she missed the music. Mrs. Liu finished the piece and sat quietly for a moment. Then, without turning around, she said, "You can come in if you'd like." Startled, Maya pushed the door open. "I'm sorry for interrupting, I was just passing by." Mrs. Liu smiled, her eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Music is meant to be shared. Never apologize for listening." Maya hovered awkwardly by the door, unsure whether to stay or go. "You're Maya Chen, yes?" Mrs. Liu asked. "I saw your name on the talent show program." "That was a mistake," Maya said quickly. "Someone else signed me up as a joke." Mrs. Liu's expression softened with understanding. "Ah, children can be cruel." She patted the bench beside her. "Would you like to play? Just for me, not for an audience." "I don't play anymore," Maya said, the words automatic by now. "Because you can't or because you won't?" Mrs. Liu's question was gentle, but it hit Maya like a physical blow. The same question her grandmother had asked the night before. "I had a bad experience," Maya said after a long pause. "At the Young Artists competition 3 years ago, I froze. Couldn't play a note. Ran off stage." Mrs. Liu nodded. "I remember hearing about that. Such pressure for young musicians." "You knew?" Maya asked, surprised. "I follow the competition circuit. I had students who competed against you," Mrs. Liu explained. "You were quite remarkable, as I recall." "Until I wasn't," Maya said bitterly. One moment doesn't define a musician, Mrs. Liu replied. Or a person. She stood up from the bench, gathering some sheet music. The piano is free if you want some time alone with it. I have a department meeting to attend. Before Maya could protest, Mrs. Liu had bustled out the door, leaving her alone in the music room. Maya stood there for a long moment, staring at the piano. It was a beautiful instrument, well-maintained and regularly tuned, nothing like the worn, upright home that had seen better days. Slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, she moved toward it. The black and white keys gleamed under the fluorescent lights, both familiar and terrifying. Maya sat down on the bench, her posture automatically adjusting to the correct form, back straight, shoulders relaxed, feet finding the pedals. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. Just one note, she told herself. One chord. If it feels wrong, you can stop. Her fingers descended, pressing gently, drawing out a simple C major chord. The sound filled the empty room, clear and true. Maya closed her eyes and played another chord, then another, letting muscle memory guide her through a simple progression. Her fingers remembered, even if she had tried to forget, before she knew, she was playing, really playing, for the first time in 3 years. Nothing complex, just a simple piece she had learned as a child, but the notes flowed from her fingers like water finding its path downhill. When the final note faded, Maya realized her cheeks were wet with tears. Something had broken open inside her. Not the wound she feared, but a crack in the wall she had built to protect herself. The piano didn't hurt her. The music didn't betray her. They were waiting, patient as old friends, for her to find her way back. As Maya walked home that afternoon, her mind buzzed with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. Maybe she could play again, not for competitions or acclaim, but for herself, for the joy of it. But the talent show still loomed, a dark cloud on her horizon. 2 weeks wasn't enough time to prepare properly, to rebuild the confidence that had been shattered. And the thought of performing in front of Vanessa and her friends, waiting gleefully for her to fail, made her stomach turn. When she reached home, her grandmother was in the garden, pruning her beloved roses. She looked up as Maya approached, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "You look different today," she observed. "Something happened." Maya dropped her backpack on the grass and sat beside her grandmother on the garden bench. "I played today," she said simply. "At school. Just for a few minutes, but I played." Her grandmother's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and took Maya's hand in her soil-stained ones, saying nothing but somehow conveying everything. "I still don't know what to do about the talent show," Maya admitted. "But I think I need to stop running from music." Her grandmother squeezed her hand. "When a bird falls from the nest, it has 2 choices. Stay on the ground forever, or learn to fly again. I always knew which one you would choose, my little songbird." 3 days. That's all Maya had left before the talent show. 3 days to prepare for something she'd spent 3 years avoiding. After her unexpected moment at the piano in the music room, Maya had made a decision. She wouldn't back out of the talent show. She wouldn't give Vanessa and her friends the satisfaction of seeing her run away. But she also wouldn't play what everyone expected. "Are you sure about this?" her grandmother asked as Maya sat at their old upright piano at home, her notebook of compositions open in front of her. "No," Maya admitted, her fingers running lightly over the keys. "But I'm doing it anyway." Her grandmother smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "That's my brave girl." Brave wasn't how Maya felt. Terrified, yes, nauseous, definitely. But something else was there too, a tiny spark that felt almost like excitement. For the past 2 days, she had been working on an original piece, one that had lived only in her head and in scribbled notations in her secret notebook. Now she was bringing it to life, note by note, on the piano that had stood silent for too long. The composition had started years ago, right after her disastrous competition performance. In those dark days, when she couldn't bear to touch a piano, melody lines still came to her, haunting her, really. She'd scribbled them down to quiet her mind, never intending to play them. Now, as her fingers found the keys, those fragments were coming together into something new. Something that wasn't the classical perfection she'd once strived for, but was entirely her own. Play it again from the middle section, her grandmother suggested, sitting in her worn armchair with a cup of tea. The part where it shifts. Maya nodded and repositioned her hands. The piece began softly, almost hesitantly, before building into something more complex, a melody that spoke of doubt transforming into determination. She played through the transition her grandmother had mentioned, where the music shifted from minor to major, from darkness into light. "That's it," her grandmother said softly when the final notes faded. "That's the story you're telling." Maya looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Music always tells a story," her grandmother replied. "This is yours, from fear to courage." Maya hadn't thought of it that way, but her grandmother was right. The composition had evolved alongside her own journey, from the broken pieces after her failure to this new, still fragile confidence. "Do you think it's good enough?" Maya asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "For the show, I mean." Her grandmother set down her teacup. "It's not about being good enough, Maya. It's about being true. This music is honest in a way those old competition pieces never could be, because this comes from your heart, not just your hands." Maya nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. True. Honest. Her own. "I should practice more," she said, turning back to the keys. "I still mess up the bridge section." Her grandmother stood, patting Maya's shoulder gently. "Don't practice until it's perfect. Practice until you can't get it wrong. There's a difference." As her grandmother left the room, Maya took a deep breath and began again from the beginning. This time she closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. When she reached the tricky bridge section, she didn't think about the notes on the page or the movement of her fingers. She thought about the feeling she wanted to convey, and somehow her hands knew what to do. When she opened her eyes, she found Zoe standing in the doorway, an expression of amazement on her face. "That was... wow," Zoe said, stepping into the room. "Your grandma let me in. Hope that's okay." Maya's hands dropped from the keys, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough to know everyone at school is in for a shock," Zoe replied, grinning. "Was that an original piece?" Maya nodded, closing her notebook quickly. "It's beautiful," Zoe said, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Nothing like what I expected." "What did you expect?" Maya asked curiously. "I don't know. Some fancy classical piece, I guess. Something technically impressive, but..." Zoe paused, searching for words. "But not me," Maya finished for her. "Exactly." Zoe's face lit up. "This feels like you. The real you. Not the quiet girl who hides in the library." Maya smiled despite herself. She hadn't realized Zoe had been paying such close attention. "So you're really going through with it?" Zoe asked. "The talent show?" "Looks that way," Maya replied, running her fingers lightly over the keys. "I figure if I'm going to be humiliated, it might as well be on my own terms." "You won't be humiliated," Zoe said firmly. "You're going to blow everyone away." "That's what my grandmother says too." "Smart woman," Zoe grinned. "Is that why you came to my house? To hear me practice?" Zoe laughed, shaking her head. "Actually, I came to warn you. Vanessa and her crew are planning something for the show. I overheard them in the bathroom." Maya's stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly," Zoe admitted. "But they were laughing about making sure you get the reception you deserve or something like that. I think they might try to distract you or mess with you somehow during your performance." Maya took a shaky breath. Of course it wouldn't be enough for them to put her on stage. They wanted to guarantee her failure. "Thanks for telling me," she said quietly. "We won't let them get away with it," Zoe said, determination in her voice. "I've got friends in the tech crew. We can watch out for whatever they're planning." Maya looked at Zoe, really looked at her for the first time. This girl she barely knew was offering to help her, to stand up for her against the popular crowd. It was unexpected and touching. "Why are you doing this?" Maya asked. "Helping me, I mean." Zoe shrugged. "Because what they're doing sucks? Because nobody deserves to be treated that way?" She paused. "And maybe because I know what it's like to be the target. Last year, before you came, it was me they picked on." "Really? Why?" "I'm on scholarship," Zoe explained. "My mom's a single parent, works 2 jobs. We don't have designer clothes or fancy vacations. At Westridge, that makes you different. And different is dangerous." Maya had never considered that Zoe might have her own struggles. She'd been so wrapped up in her own problems that she hadn't looked beyond the surface. "What happened? How did they stop?" she asked. "They didn't, really," Zoe said with a small smile. "I just stopped caring what they thought. Found my own people, my own thing." She gestured to Maya's piano. "Kind of like what you're doing now." They talked for another hour, Zoe sharing stories about Westridge and the unwritten social rules Maya had been oblivious to. By the time Zoe left, promising to meet up at school the next day, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. A growing sense of friendship. The next 2 days passed in a blur of practice and preparation. Maya spent every free moment at the piano, refining her composition, committing it to memory so thoroughly that she could play it with her eyes closed. Her grandmother listened patiently, offering suggestions here and there but mostly just providing quiet support. At school, Maya noticed a shift in how people treated her. The whispers continued, but there was curiosity mixed with the mockery now. Word had spread that she was actually going through with the performance, and a few people even wished her luck in the hallways. Zoe and her friends formed a protective circle around Maya during lunch, sharing stories about their own talent show, preparations, and effectively shielding her from Vanessa's group. "Have you decided what you're wearing?" Zoe asked as they sat in the courtyard the day before the show. Maya shook her head. She hadn't even thought about it. "You should wear something that makes you feel powerful," Zoe suggested. "When I did? My spoken word thing last year, I wore my mom's jade necklace. It was like having her on stage with me." That night, Maya stood in front of her closet, considering her options. Nothing felt right, either too casual or trying too hard. She wanted something that represented who she was now, not who she had been. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway holding a garment bag. "I thought you might need something special for tomorrow." Inside the bag was a simple but elegant dark blue dress with a subtle pattern of silver threads that caught the light when the fabric moved. "It's beautiful," Maya said, running her fingers over the material. "Is it new?" Her grandmother shook her head. "It was your mother's. She wore it for her first professional recital." Maya froze. Her mother, a concert pianist who had died when Maya was only 5, was rarely mentioned in their house. The pain of her loss was a quiet undercurrent in their lives, acknowledged but seldom discussed. "I didn't know you kept any of her things," Maya said softly. "Just a few," her grandmother replied. "This dress has been waiting for the right moment. I think tomorrow is it." Maya held the dress against herself, looking in the mirror. It was perfect, not too formal but special enough for the occasion. And knowing it had been her mother's made it feel like a talisman of sorts, a connection to a past she barely remembered. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging her grandmother tightly. "She would be so proud of you," her grandmother said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not because you're playing again, but because you're facing your fears." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay awake, playing the piece in her head, imagining herself on stage tomorrow. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach. But it was different now. Not paralyzing, just present. A reminder that she cared, that this mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "You're going to be amazing tomorrow. Can't wait to see Vanessa's face when you prove her wrong." Maya smiled in the darkness. Whatever happened tomorrow, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The morning of the talent show dawned clear and crisp. Maya went through her regular routine in a daze, her mind already at the piano, her fingers itching to play. Her grandmother made a special breakfast, but Maya could barely eat. "Nerves are good," her grandmother said, watching her push food around her plate. "They mean you care about doing well." "What if I freeze again?" Maya asked, voicing the fear that had lurked beneath the surface all week. "Then you take a breath, find your center, and start again," her grandmother replied simply. "But you won't freeze. This time is different. How can you be so sure?" Her grandmother reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "Because you're not playing for judges or scores or to be the best. You're playing for yourself. That makes all the difference." As Maya put on her mother's dress later that day, she tried to hold on to that thought. This wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about winning or impressing anyone. It was about reclaiming something she had lost. Not just music, but a part of herself. "Ready?" her grandmother asked as they prepared to leave for the school. Maya took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of the dress. "As ready as I'll ever be." Her grandmother smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "Then let's go show them who Maya Chen really is." The Westridge Academy auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents clutched programs and flowers, teachers herded students. Backstage and the tech crew made last-minute adjustments to the lighting. The annual talent show was always a highlight of the school year, but tonight felt different, charged with an extra layer of anticipation. Maya stood in the wings, watching the stage from behind the heavy curtain. Her mother's dress felt cool and smooth against her skin, the fabric catching the dim backstage lights. Her hands were surprisingly steady as she twisted a loose thread on her sleeve. "You look amazing," Zoe whispered, appearing beside her in a bright yellow dress. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," Maya admitted with a shaky laugh. "That's normal," Zoe assured her. "Just remember, whatever happens out there, you've already won by showing up." Maya nodded, trying to believe it. The past 3 days had transformed her in ways she was still processing. Regardless of how her performance went, she had faced her fear. She had sat at the piano again. She had created something that was truly hers. "Places, everyone," Mr. Daniels called, clapping his hands. "Show starts in 5 minutes." Performers scattered to their assigned waiting areas. Maya's spot was in the back row of chairs, where she would wait for her turn, 7th in the program. As she made her way there, she caught sight of Vanessa and her friends huddled near the stage door, whispering and giggling. When they noticed Maya looking, they quickly separated, Vanessa flashing an overly sweet smile. "Don't worry about them," Zoe said, following Maya's gaze. "My friend Lee is running the soundboard. He's watching for any funny business." The house lights dimmed, and Mr. Daniels walked onto the stage to welcome the audience. Maya sat stiffly in her chair, half listening to his speech about student talent and school community. Her mind was already at the piano, running through the piece one more time. The first acts passed in a blur, a rock band of junior boys, a surprisingly good stand-up comedy routine, a gymnastic display. Maya barely registered them, her focus narrowing as her turn approached. "And now we have a spoken word performance by Zoe Park," Mr. Daniels announced. Zoe squeezed Maya's hand before walking onto the stage, her yellow dress bright under the spotlight. Her voice was clear and confident as she delivered her poem about identity and belonging. Maya found herself actually listening, momentarily distracted from her own nerves. When Zoe finished to enthusiastic applause, Maya's heart leapt into her throat. She was next. "And now," Mr. Daniels said, returning to the microphone, "please welcome Maya Chen, who will be performing an original piano composition." A murmur rippled through the audience. Original composition. Not what anyone had expected. Maya rose from her chair, her legs feeling oddly disconnected from her body as she walked toward the baby grand piano positioned center stage. The spotlight followed her, warm against her skin. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her every move. As she settled onto the bench and adjusted her position, Maya caught sight of Vanessa and 2 of her friends slipping into the back row of the audience, phones held suspiciously at the ready. Whatever they were planning, it would happen soon. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a deep breath. She thought of her grandmother's words. You're not playing for judges or scores or to be the best. You're playing for yourself. She placed her hands on the keys, the cool ivory familiar beneath her fingertips. And then, before doubt could take hold, she began to play. The opening notes were soft, hesitant, just like she had been these past weeks at Westridge. A simple melody, questioning and uncertain. Maya felt her body relax as the music began to flow through her, each note leading naturally to the next. As the piece progressed, the melody grew more complex, layers building upon each other just as Maya had gradually built her courage. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, drawing out the emotions she had poured into the composition, fear giving way to determination, pain transforming into strength. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Maya realized she had forgotten about the audience, forgotten about Vanessa and her plots, forgotten even about her past failure. There was only the music, speaking truths she couldn't put into words. She reached the bridge section, the part she had struggled with during practice. For a split second, uncertainty flickered. But then she remembered. Don't think about the notes. Think about the feeling. And the feeling was clear. This was the moment of transformation, the turning point in her story. Her hands found the keys without hesitation, the music swelling into something powerful and resolute. No longer a whisper, but a declaration. This is who I am. This is what I've overcome. As she approached the final section, Maya became aware of movement in the back of the auditorium. Through half-opened eyes, she saw Vanessa and her friends standing up, phones raised. Whatever they had planned was happening now. Suddenly, several small objects sailed through the air toward the stage, paper airplanes. They fluttered around Maya, one landing directly on the piano, another brushing her arm. A ripple of confusion passed through the audience. Maya faltered for half a second, her rhythm momentarily broken. In that crucial moment, she made a choice. Instead of stopping, instead of running, she incorporated the disruption into her performance. She shifted the dynamics, playing more forcefully, letting the music rise above the distraction. Her eyes opened fully, looking directly at Vanessa for the first time, not with fear or anger, but with a calm certainty. I will not be broken by this. The paper airplanes, meant to humiliate her, instead became part of her triumph as she played through the disruption without missing a beat. She saw Mr. Daniels and another teacher moving quickly toward Vanessa's group, but Maya's focus had already returned to the music. The final section of her composition flowed from her fingers with a strength and clarity that surprised even her. No hesitation now, no doubt. Just pure expression, the culmination of everything she had felt these past weeks and these past years. As the last notes hung in the air, Maya sat perfectly still, hands resting lightly on the keys. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the auditorium erupted. The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous wave that washed over her. People were standing, first a few, then dozens, then the entire audience. Maya blinked, in disbelief as the sound grew, punctuated by cheers and whistles. She rose shakily from the bench, her legs trembling as she faced the audience. In the front row, she spotted her grandmother, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. A few rows back, Mrs. Liu was beaming, nodding as if to say, I knew you could do it. Maya took a small bow, overwhelmed by the response. As she straightened, she caught sight of Vanessa and her friends being escorted from the auditorium by Mr. Daniels, their phones confiscated, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Their plan had backfired completely. Instead of watching Maya fall apart, the audience had witnessed her triumph. The very disruption meant to humiliate her had only made her performance more powerful, her recovery more impressive. As Maya walked off stage on unsteady legs, she was met by a crowd of fellow performers offering congratulations and praise. That was incredible. Did you really write that yourself? The way you handled those jerks, amazing. Zoe pushed through the crowd to hug her. I told you, she whispered fiercely. I told you you'd blow them away. Maya couldn't speak, her emotions too tangled for words. Relief, pride, joy, they swirled together, leaving her breathless. The rest of the talent show continued, but Maya barely noticed. She sat in the wings, still floating in the afterglow of her performance, still feeling the music in her fingertips. It wasn't until the final act finished, and Mr. Daniels returned to the stage for closing remarks, that she fully tuned in again. "Before we end tonight's show," he said, "I'd like to recognize an exceptional performance. Each year our faculty selects one act that demonstrates not just talent, but also courage and artistry. This year's Spotlight Award goes to Maya Chen for her original composition and remarkable performance." Fresh applause filled the auditorium as Maya was called back to the stage. Mr. Daniels handed her a small trophy, a crystal star on a wooden base. Maya accepted it in a daze, managing a shy thank you into the microphone before retreating. As the house lights came up and people began to file out, Maya found herself surrounded by classmates she'd barely spoken to before, all wanting to congratulate her, all suddenly interested in the quiet new girl who had hidden her talent for so long. "Was that really the first time you've performed in 3 years?" someone asked. Maya nodded, still clutching the trophy. "Well, you couldn't tell," the girl said admiringly. "You looked like you belonged up there." Belonged. The word echoed in Maya's mind as she made her way through the crowd toward her grandmother. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, she did feel like she belonged, not because she was trying to fit in, but because she had finally allowed herself to stand out. Her grandmother enveloped her in a tight hug. "Your mother would have been so proud," she whispered. "I am so proud." "I didn't freeze," Maya said, her voice muffled against her grandmother's shoulder. "Of course you didn't," her grandmother replied, pulling back to look at her. "You're stronger than you knew." As they walked toward the exit, Maya spotted Vanessa and her friends in the hallway, being lectured by Mr. Daniels and the principal. Their faces were sullen, their postures defensive. Vanessa looked up as Maya passed, their eyes meeting briefly. In that moment, something shifted. The power dynamic that had seemed so fixed, popular girl versus invisible new kid, had been completely upended. Maya didn't feel the need to gloat or even acknowledge the reversal. She simply held Vanessa's gaze steadily before continuing on her way. Outside in the cool evening air, Zoe caught up with them. "A bunch of us are going for ice cream to celebrate. You should come, Maya." Maya looked at her grandmother, who smiled encouragingly. "Go," she said. "This is your night. Enjoy it." As Maya walked toward Zoe's waiting friends, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of her past failure, the fear that had defined her for so long, they weren't gone completely, but they no longer controlled her. They had wanted to embarrass her. Instead, she had rediscovered herself. The music that had been silenced for too long was playing again, and this time, Maya wouldn't let anything stop it.